Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. This is Craig Hayman, CEO of AVEVA, and I'm joined by James Kidd, Deputy CEO and CFO. Please turn to page 4 in the presentation. In every respect, AVEVA delivered on the vision of the digital twin and performed well in fiscal 2020. It was another good year, with strong results and good progress against medium-term targets. Revenue grew 8.8% year-to-year. Adjusted EBIT grew 23.3% to £216.8 million, and delivering a margin of 26%, up from a margin of 22.9% last year. We made good progress on the shift to subscription, which delivers long-term value to customers and shareholders. Recurring revenue, which is subscription revenue plus support and maintenance revenue, is now over 62% of all revenue. This is ahead of plan and above the medium-term recurring revenue target that we established as we began the transition in October 2018. Cloud contributed to the growth with an increase in cloud total contract value of nearly 200%. Overall software revenue grew 11.8%, and subscription software revenue grew by 45%. With the integration of the Heritage AVEVA and Heritage Schneider Electric software businesses complete, and a company extremely focused on customers, we successfully navigated the impact of COVID-19 in the final quarter of the year. Please turn to page 5. COVID-19 has changed the world, and we expect the market disruption caused by the global macroeconomic downturn to continue, particularly in the first 6 months of this financial year. While COVID-19 has changed the world, we have changed with it. AVEVA entered the world crisis well-positioned, with a strong balance sheet and ongoing cash generation. Our commitment as a leader in industrial software is to build a sustainable future for the world while creating value for customers, employees, and shareholders. As important are our values, which we lean on in good times and in challenging times. We use our values to guide us while delivering operational excellence, aligning our commercial model with that of our customers through a subscription transition, and accelerating the digitalization of the industrial world. Our focus on protecting lives and livelihoods means that, for example, over 95% of employees are now working remotely. In the past 90 days, we have accelerated our own transition to being a truly digital company. Our customers in the industrial sector face a world that is changing faster than their ability to change. We are helping them accelerate their digital transformation and helping them free up precious operating expense and be more certain that their capital projects will be delivered quickly and with lower risk. We have made some of our cloud solutions and online training available for no fee to customers who are themselves working remotely. In April, we delivered 18,000 online learning classes for monitoring and control. This is a 25x increase year to year. Our commitment to give back into the communities in which we work and live has grown, with the executive team and board committing 10% of their base salaries for 6 months to further the AVEVA Action for Good initiatives around COVID-19. This is in addition to the company's existing commitment of 1% of profits before tax to the program. This year, over 1,500 employees completed 1 day or more of charitable work in their community supporting the UN sustainability goals. We are the same company as before, but now working differently and firmly focused on the future. Here, I will hand over to James Kidd for the financial review. James?
Thanks, Craig, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. I'll now take you through the financial review of the FY20 results. So let's start by looking at the main highlights of the year. I'm really delighted that we closed out a very successful year, delivering a strong financial performance, which is in line with our medium-term targets on revenue growth and margin, and ahead on recurring revenue. And this was despite the challenging conditions we faced in the latter part of Q4. Despite having staff having to work from home during March, thankfully there was minimal disruption to closing contracts, with only a couple of deals that slipped. So great credit must be given to our sales, services and support teams for maintaining their focus and delivering these results. On a statutory basis, revenue increased by 8.8% to just under £834 million, driven by strong sales execution, stable end markets for the most part of the year, and some benefit from multi-year contracts. Our organic constant currency revenue growth was 7.4%, and I have a revenue bridge later in the presentation which walks you through the moving parts. One of the cornerstones of our medium-term guidance was to increase the level of recurring revenue through the transition to a subscription-based revenue model. We continue to make strong progress, and I'm delighted that we've already exceeded our medium-term guidance at 62%. And I have more on that later. The strong revenue performance flowed through to profit, driven by strong operating leverage and cost control, with adjusted EBIT up 23% to £216.8 million. This also helped keep our medium-term guidance for EBIT margin on track, which improves to 26%, and this helped drive strong growth in adjusted EPS. And finally, despite the challenges of COVID-19, the group is in a strong financial position and well positioned to deal with the uncertainty the pandemic has created. From a financial perspective, we have around £250 million in available liquidity at the end of May, and that will help us navigate these uncertain times. And it's from this position of financial strength that the board is recommending a final dividend of 29 pence per share, amounting to approximately 47 million, which is flat compared to last year. This balances the performance in FY20 with the uncertainty of the current macro situation. So moving on, and let's start with the income statement. From a regional perspective, Asia Pacific maintained its strong first half performance, up almost 27% year on year, with growth across all of the region, including China, which delivered double-digit growth, despite the earlier impact of COVID-19. The growth in recurring revenues across all geographies was also a highlight of the year, and we'll come back to that later in the presentation. Gross margin improvement continues to be a key objective for the services organisation, which, despite putting some pressure on the top line, helped drive an improvement of over 200 basis points. We've also controlled our OPEX well, with costs up 5.7% on a constant currency basis, with the investments for growth we have made in the business being offset by the savings from the cost synergy programme. The strong top-line performance and operating leverage has driven a 23.3% increase in adjusted EBIT. And on an adjusted basis, the effective tax rate for the year was 18%, which compared with approximately 20% last year, as we were able to benefit from the higher intellectual property incentives in the US and the UK, particularly the patent box in the UK. We expect the effective rate for FY21 to be between 19 and 21%, depending on which countries our profits land. So overall, a very strong financial performance for the year, in line with our medium-term objectives. So let's move on and let me walk you through the revenue bridge, which shows the different moving parts. Starting on the left, we have last year's statutory revenue of £766.6 million. From that, we add back the deferred revenue haircut of £8.7 million in the prior year, which takes us to the pro forma revenue of £775.2 million for FY19. We then adjust approximately 1% for the disposals of the distribution businesses in Italy, Germany and Scandinavia, so we can compare on a like-for-like basis. This gives us the organic revenue base of £769.8 million for FY19, from which we had organic constant currency growth of 7.4%. To complete the picture, we have the adjustments for the reduction in services, the acquisition of MaxScript, the small deferred revenue haircut in FY20, and FX translation, and that brings us back to the reported number of £833.8 million. Okay, so that was the revenue bridge, showing the year-on-year change. So let's now look at the breakdown of revenue. As you know, we have set recurring revenue as one of our key strategic aims as part of our medium-term plan, and we've continued to make good progress with recurring revenue for the year at 62.2%, ahead of our medium-term guidance. The key driver behind the improvement has been the increase in subscription revenue, which grew 43% in the year. As we said previously, one of the key initiatives put in place was the new sales incentive model, which rewards our salespeople more for closing subscription contracts. We also launched AVEVA Flex at the start of this year, which is our subscription offering initially focused on the monitoring and control business unit. This has been very successful, growing over 150% year on year. This is a combination of new business and included converting some existing customers such as Procter & Gamble and Network Rail, who shifted from maintenance contracts to subscription. We also saw strong growth in other business units for subscription. In engineering, we saw some customers move from a one-year contract to a multi-year subscription contract. From a regional perspective, subscription grew strongly across each of the regions, with Asia Pacific almost doubling compared to FY19 and benefiting from the large EPC renewal that we closed in the first half. We continue to see an increase in multi-year contracts in the second half, and in total we closed subscription contracts with a total contract value of approximately £350 million, of which approximately 30% had a term of 12 months, with 70% a mix of 3 and 5 years. Commercially securing our customers on multi-year deals is important to be able to lock in reliable cash flows and provide much better visibility. As you know, under IFRS 15 we have to recognise the licence element up front, with around 2/3 recognised on a typical 3-year contract, with invoicing on an annual basis. Therefore, in the first year, revenue is ahead of cash, which then unwinds in years 2 and 3. This explains the increase in the contract assets, which you can see on the balance sheet. So overall, the growth of 43% in subscription helped drive a 23% increase in recurring revenue. Moving on to look at the other revenue categories. Maintenance revenue was slightly down year on year on an organic constant currency basis. This was as expected as we continue to see customers switch from support contracts to new subscription agreements. Perpetual licenses declined by almost 17%, which again reflects the strategy to move customers to subscription. Regionally, we saw a drop of 17 million in EMEA and 10 million in Americas. Our services are sold alongside the software licenses to ensure efficient deployment of the software and brings value to the customer faster. Services revenue declined by 5% to 136 million as a result of a greater focus on higher margin services, and we started to work with some of our service partners to deliver that work. The decline was all in the Americas, where we've been more selective in bidding for service projects, particularly in the pipeline SCADA business. And the final point I would make is that overall our software revenue, excluding services, grew almost 12% year on year, which shows the progress we're making on improving our revenue mix. So let's move on and now look at the cost base. Total adjusted costs increased by 4.5% in reported terms and 3.3% in constant currency, as we continue to maintain tight control over the cost base. Cost of sales decreased by 1.5% due to the focus on higher margin services and more use of offshore service delivery centres. Research and development costs were 120.7 million, which is up just under 4% as we continue to invest in the development programmes and the product integration, as well as new product launches such as the Unified Operations Centre for data centres and continued investment in cloud and AI programmes. As a reminder, the company remains very committed to R&D and enhancing our products, and we spend approximately 15% of revenue on R&D each year, all of which is expensed in the year in which it's incurred. Selling costs increased by 5.6% to 209.1 million due to investments made in the sales team, both for account managers and sales specialists, and also investment in marketing, including customer events such as the AVEVA World Summit in Singapore. Administrative costs increased by 7.1%, reflecting the investment in the back office in the areas of HR, finance and IT as we exit the transitional service agreements from Schneider. Net impairment loss on financial assets is the bad debt charge, and you can see the charge has increased by 1.3 million in the year. We've made an additional provision to cover the risks arising from the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, looking at FY21, we've taken a prudent approach in setting the cost budget for the year to protect our margins and cash generation, whilst continuing to invest for the long term in strategic areas, particularly in cloud and artificial intelligence. There will be lower cost of sales due to lower services revenue. and we've taken action on our costs, including a pay freeze, minimising recruitment to only critical talent, and reducing our travel and event costs. The annual bonus scheme is also dependent on achieving revenue and profit targets. Overall, our cost budget is £50 to £60 million lower compared to our plans pre-COVID-19. Craig will talk about this later and how we're adapting to the new world. So moving on to look at our exceptional and normalised items. Acquisition and integration costs were £29 million related to the integration. These costs were incurred on contractors, integration of our functions and locations, and investment in new systems such as the ERP. It also includes relatively small transaction costs from the acquisitions and disposals that we made during the year. The integration costs will continue into FY21 as we complete the exit of the transitional service agreement from Schneider and the implementation of the new ERP system. Restructuring costs relate to the cost of severance incurred in the year arising from the integration, and other income is the reimbursement of integration expenses from Schneider as part of the merger agreement, which amounted to £3.8 million, and £7.7 million from a gain on the disposal of the Wonderware distributors. There's a slide shortly that will give you more detail on the synergies achieved and what's left to be done on the integration. Moving on to the balance sheet, and overall not much has really changed compared to last year. The acquisition of MaxGrip and Aerosolve added approximately £13 million of net assets to the balance sheet and £16.8 million to goodwill. Contract assets have increased by £42 million to £142 million, driven by revenue recognition on the multi-year contracts as I mentioned previously. Contract liabilities, which represents deferred revenue, increased to £177 million due to the timing of renewals and the increase in subscription contracts. Therefore, when you look at the net of these balances together, there's a net credit of £35 million, which means that overall our invoicing is still ahead of revenue. We closed the year with just under £150 million in net cash. None of the £100 million revolving credit facility was drawn down at the year end. We've seen strong collections from customers since the year end, with cash at the end of May being approximately £150 million. Overall, we have a strong balance sheet, and with around £250 million of liquidity, we have a sound basis for proposing the final dividend. Turning to the cash flow for the year. Cash flow from operations before tax was slightly down on last year due to the increased exceptional costs and the impact of multi-year contracts, as I mentioned before. In the year, we paid out exceptional costs related to the integration. And finally, the working capital movements show a change in contract assets with an outflow related to multi-year contracts, and there's also a swing of approximately £22.4 million on contract liabilities. So turning to the integration of the Heritage AVEVA business and the Heritage Schneider Electric software business is largely complete and has been successfully delivered in line with our plans. Our integrated customer proposition is strong and is enabling AVEVA to play a key role in the digitalisation of the industrial world. We are making excellent progress in our journey towards a subscription-based business model. And as I previously mentioned, we exited the year with a run rate of cost synergies of approximately £33 million, quite well ahead of the £25 million target we set at the time of the merger. These were achieved across all the functions and included rationalisation of duplicated functions, the implementation of common systems, shared services for back office, and real estate consolidation. The areas remaining to complete are in real estate and IT. There are some office consolidations in Sydney, Beijing and Tokyo, and the IT transitional arrangements with Schneider Electric, which although well progressed, are still to be fully exited. And they relate to the transition of the Heritage SES offices onto the new AVEVA IT infrastructure and the implementation of the new ERP system. We have seen some level of disruption from COVID-19 in not being able to access some of those offices. Overall, we feel that the merger of the two businesses delivers significant value for our customers and for our shareholders. As such, we aim to participate in the further consolidation of the industrial software industry, as and when value creation opportunities arise. And to this end, we've put in place an experienced M&A team who will help progress those opportunities. So to summarise, the group has delivered a very strong set of results in FY20 in line with our medium-term roadmap. Total software revenue growth was strong, and we're particularly pleased with our progress on recurring revenue. And those recurring revenues give us a resilient business model, which combined with a strong balance sheet will allow us to navigate through these uncertain times, and gives us the confidence to propose a final dividend that takes into account the strong performance we saw in FY20. Thank you for your attention, and I'll now hand back to Craig for his review. Thank you very much.
Thank you, James. I've talked before about how the industrial sector was the first to use digital technology, but it is the very last to use it at scale. Industries like retail, that are already much more digital, have responded to COVID-19 by becoming even more digital. COVID-19 is changing supply chains and demand across the world more quickly than many industrial companies can themselves change. The CTOs and chief digital officers that they have hired are driving digital agendas to take advantage of low-cost and high-scale technologies like cloud, big data, and artificial intelligence. We are working with these companies every day to help them move more quickly, and it comes down to two tactics. First, work to quickly visualize operational data across disparate heterogeneous systems and bring people together to understand the data. This is our Unified Operations Center. Then use that data to deliver meaningful expense reductions through AI and machine learning to prevent unplanned downtime and increase business performance. The operational expense savings are then returned to the businesses and used to further accelerate the company's digital agenda. One of our customers, ADNOC, generates $1 billion in economic value from the Panorama Digital Command Center. Next, bring certainty to capital projects. The pressure on these projects is immense, so reduce risk and increase delivery and operational certainty using better design tools, better simulation, and better materials management. This is what we do with Worley, for example, in the cloud. Let's turn to page 18 for details on performance across each business unit and geography. AVEVA again delivered growth across all 4 business units and all 3 geographies, with improved execution from both direct and indirect sales channels. The indirect sales channel is approximately 1/3 of total revenue. Here you see subscription transition in each geography, with recurring revenue growing 20%, 16%, and 52% in the Americas, EMEA, and Asia Pacific, respectively. Customer wins include P&G, Colgate-Palmolive, BP, Veolia Water, and Olam. Within the business unit, subscription revenue grew 25% approximately in engineering, 150% in monitoring and control, 250% in asset performance management, and 70% in planning and operations. Recurring revenue is approximately 80% of total revenue for engineering and 45 to 50% for the other business units. AVEVA Flex gained traction with customers and a highly differentiated asset performance management portfolio, which contributed to the growth. Let's cover a great customer win on page 19, Olam International. Olam are a global agricultural and food producer. They work with a network of coffee farmers in Africa and throughout the world to grow and provide food, feed, and fiber into a global supply chain. They selected AVEVA's manufacturing software to increase quality, value, asset productivity, and ensure the sustainability of its global industrial footprint. This solution gives visibility across disparate systems and uses analytics to improve operational efficiency. A new customer, this was a great AVEVA Flex enterprise win for us in Southeast Asia. On page 20, another customer win, this time with China Merchants Industry Holding, who are using AVEVA Unified Engineering to digitalize the shipyard. They work across diverse marine industries and are intent on becoming a leading marine manufacturer for China. They can now use one shared data set to produce vessels to a shared standard and go from design to delivery quickly and with certainty. State-of-the-art vessels with state-of-the-art software. Please turn to page 21. Next is Nestle, who needs no introduction. They've been working with AVEVA for more than 20 years, and we have extended our work together to expand their use of our monitoring and control software to streamline processes and boost productivity. We're working across hundreds of factories that make up their global food and beverage production facilities. On page 22, we're excited to talk about our new Unified Operations Center, which is a solution for data centers. Announced in April, it is targeted at hyperscale data center providers and connects disparate systems and centers into a single view. We built this solution in partnership with Schneider Electric, who have a very strong presence here. The go-to-market is being led by Schneider Electric, who are initially targeting this solution at their top 40 global accounts. This further extends the Unified Operations Center, already available for oil and gas, mining, and smart cities, into a new industry and market with a great partner. Now please turn to page 23. Some of our operational improvements really began to take hold in the year. Here you see recurring revenue by business unit on the right. We're pleased to have achieved 62% recurring revenue overall, but there is still more ahead in our subscription journey. Services declined as we focused more on services that are attached to software and began building an ecosystem of services partners. The decline in perpetual software was more than offset by the growth in higher value subscription revenue. Maintenance revenue grew even with the impact of subscription. Included in subscription growth is cloud. Let's quickly take a look at the engineering, monitoring, and control and asset performance management software all running in the cloud with 99.995% uptime during the year. One of our new cloud customers is Veolia Water, who are using our engineering tools to help them standardize their engineering operations. Each AVEVA cloud customer uses AVEVA Connect to connect to their data and drive a digital transformation. Let's sign in from a browser and see the engineering tools at work. Here you see the unified engineering tools running seamlessly with high performance, navigating through and working on a complex industrial facility. You're seeing not just the 3D design, but also the knowledge graph of the asset to understand how it will operate in production and how it can be delivered on time. Next, we'll switch over to an operational view and with no code, quickly create an operational view of an industrial facility. Again, we're not just seeing the visual design, but navigating the knowledge graph of the industrial asset across a diverse, heterogeneous footprint. This is why the Unified Operations Center is so fast to deploy. And there you have it, a real-time operational view bringing the facility to life. Now remember that next step. Use that data to deliver meaningful operations, expense reductions through AI and machine learning to prevent unplanned downtime. Still in the cloud, let's look for patterns and anomalies in the operational data to predict when something's going to go wrong before it does. Here we're looking at the issues that have been found, the projects that will be impacted, and the cases or work tasks that need to be completed to manage the performance of the asset. We are now on page 25. In September 2018, we provided a medium-term roadmap with overall constant currency revenue growth at or above the market, increases in recurring revenue, and improvements in adjusted EBIT margin. We hit all our entry milestones this past year on those elements and overachieved on the third element, recurring revenue. This year, we continue to execute against our revenue and adjusted EBIT margin targets and intend to provide a higher recurring revenue target at the Capital Markets Day currently planned for the fall. Because of the near-term disruption due to COVID-19, it's not meaningful to provide a new recurring revenue target at this time, although we do see our investments in cloud and AVEVA Flex delivering further increases to recurring revenue. Page 26 gives our perspective on COVID-19. The world is changing quickly, and digitalization is key to dealing with the challenges our customers face, while freeing up operational expense and delivering with certainty. Subscription provides a lot of flexibility to customers who benefit from lower upfront costs and higher value. And with the world working remotely, cloud becomes a priority. Customers who had not prioritized cloud have changed course and are shifting to the cloud. For AVEVA, multi-year contracts provide resilient cash flows. We have not and don't intend to make staff reductions in response to the economic environment, nor do we intend to follow any staff or make use of any government support programs. But we quickly took action in March to reduce costs by £50 to £60 million versus our original plan for FY21. We are being prudent while continuing to invest for the future when the world shifts from respond to recovery and then renewal. In summary, on page 27, we performed well last year and delivered on our commitments. We're in a strong financial position with ongoing cash generation. Recurring revenue provides a level of resiliency, and we will continue our shift to subscription to deliver higher levels of recurring revenue. And finally, we are being prudent while investing for the long term. That's it. Thank you for your interest, and thank you for your time. Now let's open up the line for questions.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please press star 1 should you wish to ask a question. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, that is star 1 should you wish to ask a question.
Was related to the guidance. I think you mentioned in the press release about, I think, seeing a more of a 1H weighted impact on the revenue going forward. I guess, are you able to provide any quantification around that? And number 2, are you thinking about this more in terms of like a V-shaped recovery? I think it'd be interesting just to hear any commentary you have and what you're seeing in the end markets right now as well.
Thanks for the question. This is Craig. Can you guys hear me okay?
I hear you fine.
Yeah, great. I think I'm sorry, I think I only caught the second half of the question. So with respect to the economy, look, it is dramatic swings in the last 60 days. Although in the last 30 days, it's certainly been more positive. So one of the indicators we look at is the manufacturing index. That above 50 is growth, below 50 is not. We saw that drop dramatically 2 months ago to 35 in some countries around the world, some of the major economies. But in the last 30 days, the main numbers have all either they've not gotten worse, in fact, gotten substantially better. Still below 50, but gotten better. So that's a bit of a positive sign. I think the other element is that our markets are really not focused on discretionary spend. Our markets are focused on energy, power, fuels, chemicals used in clothing, for example, food, beverage, pharmaceuticals, and we see growth in those sectors. In the final months of the year, we still saw good deal flow. Without any doubt, it was harder. People working remotely, it's not getting on planes. It is harder to do that, but we still see a good trajectory of deals. I think James highlighted some of the pressure we see. Perpetual software, a typical capital expense, is harder to sell. Subscription software is normally an operational expense is a lot easier. James, anything you'd want to add?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Just really following on from Craig, I think perpetuals, we are seeing more pressure, but subscription is growing, continues to grow well. So, and obviously with the services, our service people can't get on site, to visit customers, etc. So that's, causing some impact on our services revenue as well.
Okay. James, just one follow-up question too, and thank you for providing earlier the data on the TCV data around, the subscription deals and, the split in terms of, 12 months and multi-year deals. Can you give us a sense of how that compares to last year as well? Because I think we can back into, the pull forward, obviously, from the data points you give us for this fiscal year. So can you give us a comparison for the prior year?
I can't give you the specifics, but it's certainly, it'd be slightly up year on year in terms of the mix, in terms of there'd be slightly more multi-year deals in FY20 compared to FY19.
Okay, thanks.
Operator, I think we're ready for the next question.
Yes, the next question is from Stacey Pollard. Please ask your question.
Hi, thank you very much. A few questions from me. On the 50 to 60 million in cost savings, what portion would you say is permanent and carries into 2021 versus maybe the shorter term savings from the lower T&E or events going virtual, et cetera? So really, that's a part of the question. And then where do you see most of the margin gains coming from in the future years as you head towards that 30%? So maybe how much is mix shift? Are there further synergies? And then other areas. And maybe if I can do a follow-up.
Stacey, I'll start. James, I'm sure will add something here. In terms of the cost savings, for the obvious point of that is we're not traveling, and so we assume very little limited travel, physical travel around the world with our team. So that's one example of cost savings. I think we all look every day at the newspapers to understand when air travel will return to normal. It's certainly not now, but perhaps it's so at some point we will return to higher levels of travel. I will say that as we're in this respond phase, sort of looking towards recovery, we're thinking about what does this mean to the future of work, of how we work. Our 150 Scrum teams are now working remotely, and while that was challenging to set up, they're actually driving with a lot of productivity now, in fact, increased productivity now. So I think you'll end up with some level of that cost savings will be sustainable longer term, and our focus will be, of course, to invest those savings for growth. In terms of the mix shift, I think Stacey, you understand our model. Subscription is still growing quite well, and every time a pound of subscription revenue over and above a pound of perpetual software creates more free cash flow and drives margin improvement after about 3 years. And so we see still a large amount of benefit in the out years through increasing the subscription mix. James?
Yeah, so just on the 50 to 60, Stacey, it relates to recruitment freeze, pay freeze, and as Craig says, coming down on travel and events and such like. I would estimate maybe 10 to 15 million of that would be sort of permanent. That's just an estimate, but I think that in that sort of ballpark. And then in terms of the margin gains, certainly the mix shift is an important part. Also, subscription as it builds obviously delivers higher margins, so that will come through. And also our focus on services as we drive higher margin services and do more services through partners. That will also help improve our margins. And also just this broader theme of operational improvement that we're still driving. There's still benefits to come through from pricing, from improving our channel performance, and also the benefits from expanding our relationship with Schneider. So those are the things that will contribute to that margin trajectory.
Okay, and then just the follow-up, two, would be how do you see your cloud business developing? Is that something that could double again? And maybe a quick comment on what products people are more interested in the cloud. So is it more engineering or APM or monitoring and control? And then, last question really, now that your Schneider integration is largely complete, any thoughts on M&A?
Wow, you really packed questions in.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Good questions. They're all good.
Sorry.
First on cloud. We have been investing in cloud for some time now, at least 18 months, building up a DevOps team, ensuring that we have single sign-on, the ability to provide high levels of uptime. In fact, we publish the uptime of all of our services publicly. The cloud contracts that customers sign or click and sign are all on our website for people to quickly, easily get going with cloud. So we feel like we've done a lot of the heavy lifting to bring up more and more cloud solutions through the same AVEVA Connect system. We're going to continue that investment, and we're going to listen very deeply to the sales desk who are off selling on what customers want. So I'll give you one example. One pattern is, we've talked before in our engineering tools, we have a database called Dabacon, which is a network hierarchical database. We run that in the cloud, and it's very efficient versus some of our competitors. They rely on you have to license a third-party relational database, which is expensive to run in the cloud. So we see customers switching very easily to do an engineering work around the world using a cloud Davicon system that we're providing to them through their engineering tools. It's one example. APM, also a lot of great growth APM in the cloud. The more access you have in data, the more data APM has access to, the better the machine learning, the better the artificial intelligence. And then finally, really we're just seeing it come online is around remote workers, sort of remote workers in the field, where you're doing dispatch of tasks and things like this. You'll hear from more about that in the coming year. And M&A, I'll hand to James.
Yeah, thanks, Stacey. We continue to work on a pipeline of opportunities and progress those. I would say that operationally it's a bit more difficult, obviously, just given remote working and such like. But we continue to look at opportunities, and there's a mixture of smaller things and some bigger things. But having got through the bulk of the integration now, we can now focus on other opportunities.
That's perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is from Mohammed Mwala. Please ask your question.
Great. Thank you very much. Good morning, guys. A couple from me. First, just as we think about, when sort of some of your end markets like oil and gas have gone into downturns, what is different this time versus previously? I know that historically you were linked to CapEx. Now you're more into OpEx. But in terms of the solution and product sets, what are the kind of products you have in the kind of low ASP, quick ROI, kind of quick sales cycle categories? And how significant are these for you to kind of help continue to drive growth for yourself, even though your customers still have to kind of cut costs? And then related to that, kind of appetite for sort of native cloud products, is this causing a shift? We've seen, as a result of the kind of COVID crisis more broadly, adoption of kind of public cloud and native cloud applications really step up. In your end markets, are you kind of seeing that? And then secondly, just on coming back on services, obviously you talked about the mix shift, James, but where are you in terms of engaging with your system integrators, particularly as you kind of try to kind of extend growth? Is this becoming a meaningful channel alongside Schneider for you, or is there more work to do there? Thank you.
Thanks, Mo. I'll start and I'll hand to James. In reverse order, Mo, in terms of the native cloud activity, customers who were perhaps not, everyone's on a different adoption curve with cloud. As you can imagine, in the last 90 days, customers who had previously told us, sometimes even just a few weeks before, and said, don't ever talk to us about cloud again, said, hey, what's that cloud solution you have again? And we're very eager to trial or begin using our software running in the cloud. And that is in the oil and gas and in other industries too. And really a traumatic shift as the world is going through. It forces you to prioritize, and cloud lets you get going very, very rapidly. I mean, you've seen this in other sectors too. In terms of quick wins in oil and gas and low selling prices, our Unified Operations Center is really fast to deploy. We've talked about how the $1 billion that ADNOC provides, but that began as a Unified Operations Center, an 8-week project with ADNOC to stand up that beautiful 50-meter display, the view onto all their operating companies. So we are really deploying a lot of those. In fact, we're in the middle of the handover of one of those for another oil and gas major that really, they tried it with another vendor. It was too difficult. It didn't do what they needed. It didn't provide the context. It was more sort of a screen scrape view. It didn't understand the knowledge behind the data that was being presented. So Unified Operations Center is really good. The other is around the supply chain optimization. In oil and gas, you've got energy and you've got fuel, and the energy is relatively stable, but fuel is really dramatically shifting as we all don't fly. And then you've got overproduction. So it's a classic supply chain problem. So our customers who typically didn't run that sort of value chain optimization more than a few times a year are forced to rerun that value chain optimization, sometimes multiple times every 30 days. And again, that's our software. That all runs in the cloud. That's our Spiral suite. It sits inside planning and operations. And again, there's good growth in there. Relatively, the question we always get is, why are you priced so low based on the value it's delivering to the customer? Another good question. James, on services.
Yeah, on services, we are starting to build out this SI channel. We've done a few projects in the year where we sold the licenses directly to the customer, and the customer engaged one of the big consulting firms to do the implementation, and that worked really well. We're continuing to train up some of the SI people and get them enabled, and there's a specific work stream driving that. So there's certainly more work to do, but we have made good progress, and really want to build on that this year and into next year.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Ready for another question, operator?
Yes, the next question is from James Goodman. Please ask your question.
Good morning, Craig, James. Thanks for taking my questions. Firstly, just on the multi-year subscription deals, those have been a big feature of the last couple of years, and clearly there's this complicating factor just around IFRS 15 recognition and the upfront element of those. But the question is, to what extent are we now into sort of a renewal cycle around your larger customers there, or are there still large customers to convert in the coming period, and how do you see the opportunity to sign multi-year deals in the current environment? The second question is a follow-up on M&A. You made some interesting comments there actually in the pre-prepared remarks around putting an M&A team in place. But, we've also seen Schneider do a big deal since we last spoke in a related space. So the question is, how do you draw the line between, I guess, yourselves and Schneider there, and is there any discussion at potentially looking at closer alignment or combination of any of the Schneider assets with the AVEVA assets? And actually, just a clarification, because I think I missed some comments, thirdly, on China. I think you said it's still growing double-digit despite the weakness that you flagged early there. Are we getting close to business as usual in China? Did you make some commentary around the recovery you've seen there? Thank you.
Great.
I'll start with multi-year.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So we're not quite in the renewal cycle. We really have to, this year we're in FY21, and then FY22 will be the ones that the deals will start renewing then. We have a couple of big deals in the pipeline for the second half of this year, which are two of our larger customers. But all our major sort of EPC customers are now on a multi-year contract. So it's now the smaller ones where they're preparing to commit, and we're still seeing good examples of those sort of deals in the pipeline. So we're not seeing any dramatic change there as yet. So there's still more to do, and we do expect multi-years to continue to be a feature of this year.
And on the M&A, look, there's a chart in the backup that the chart hasn't changed. I mean, it's a different chart. It just hasn't changed from every one of our sessions with investors of the areas that we have on focus on inorganic activity. If you look at Schneider Electric just announced, and I believe one of them is now closed, ProLight, which is hardware software solution for brewing and other industries, and also RIB software, which is sort of more architectural engineering construction software in the CapEx cycle. When you look at those acquisitions and you consider what they do and look at our focus, that chart in the deck, you realize that they are an adjacency to us than one that we have not selected. We certainly spend time thinking about those companies and many others on how they fit within our strategy, but they were sort of adjacencies to our strategy. Now, we are eager as Schneider completes these two acquisitions to build a go-to-market relationship with RIB and ProLight, as we have with all of Schneider Electric. We have a good go-to-market relationship with Schneider Electric, and we intend to carry on doing so. Finally, on China. Look, China certainly has, everyone's looking very closely at China as to, its own recovery. The signs are good in terms of just energy consumption, in terms of manufacturing output. The signs are good. Our employees in China were some of the very first to learn the best practices around the lockdown. They then shared those best practices with us across the rest of the world, and they're also now defining the new best practices on how to get back to work. China is one of the very few offices around the world where we have people physically in the office working to as they enter to the sort of renewal phase.
Helpful, thank you.
Next question, please.
Yes, the next question is from Michael Breeze. Please ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. A couple from me. I think in reiterating your midterm goals, understandably the cost synergy seems to be running a bit ahead of track, which is good. Are you comfortable saying, Craig, that the 30% sort of margin exiting fiscal 2022 is still the ambition today? And then on free cash flow, James, there's obviously an impact from subscription. What would you expect for free cash flow in 2021? Are we still seeing sort of a drag effect before we get into the sort of the renewal cycle? Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. On the medium-term guidance around the margins of driving towards 30%, yes, we still have that in our sights to get to 30%. We have multiple ways to get there. When we laid that out in October 2018, we had sort of operational improvement, we had mix, we had several other levers inside the business. We'd also risk mitigated it that allowed us to get there through multiple ways, and we're still on track. There's no doubt that COVID is a substantial challenge. But you'll see the action that we've taken around cost reductions versus what we were planning for this year. Our hands are firmly on the wheel of this business, and we're very rapidly making decisions and choices and actioning to align to maintain the alignment around our strategy and around our medium-term guidance. James Kidd?
Yeah. Just on the free cash flow point, Michael. So as we come round to the renewal cycle in FY22, we should see our cash conversion improve in FY21. And we saw in the second half of FY20 cash conversion at 92%, which was a step up from the first half. So we should expect free cash flow or cash conversion to improve a bit compared to FY20 and FY21.
So 2022 is when it should see a more meaningful step up?
Yes. Yeah.
And finally, just on the cloud TCV, did you actually give an absolute value for that along with the 200% growth rate?
It's roughly about... sorry.
Go ahead, James.
I was going to say, TCV, cloud TCV is roughly 5% of our total TCV.
Okay, thank you.
Next question, please.
Yes, the next question is from Michael Tyndall. Please ask your question.
Yeah, hi there. Thanks for taking my questions. Just a couple, really. In terms of the margin progress, if I'm not wrong, back in April you suggested that it might actually be a bit slower in 21, and maybe I'm reading too much into today's statement, but it feels like you've actually dropped that. Is that because things have perhaps improved, or you've been more aggressive on costs such that you will continue to see progress in 21? And then just on the multi-years, it's probably more my understanding than anything else. in terms of recognizing the licenses up front, is it the same for the profit? So are we seeing a profit boost to the same degree as we're seeing in the revenue side because we are recognizing that profit as and when those contracts are signed? Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I'll take those. So margin progress, it's consistent really what we said at the April trading update, is that we expect a modest improvement in the margin percentage in FY21, and through the actions we've taken on the costs, compared to original plan, we've taken 50 to 60 million pounds of cost out through the hiring freeze, no pay increases, reducing discretionary spend, as we said. So, it's really consistent with what we said back in April. On the multi-years, the license element we take up front, there are costs associated with that license revenue, such as sales commission, and maybe third-party costs. But yes, in essence, a large proportion of that would drop through to profit.
Perfect. And one maybe quick follow-up. I think last year you mentioned Schneider 2 and 3 revenues were about 10% of your total. Do you have an update for that number?
It's still roughly around 10%. Some of the go-to-market has changed a bit in the year, so it's not quite as visible as it once was, because Schneider now buy through some of our third-party distributors, although we're still involved in helping with that sale, but the revenue would go through our distributor rather than through our books directly, and then we get commission from the distributor. But yes, in essence, it's still around 10%.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Once again, that is star 1 should you wish to ask a question. And the next question is from George Webb. Please ask your question.
Morning, Craig and James. One question more in the medium term. When you look across the business today, there are several parts, that could be positively impacted. But if you had to pick a single product area where you see the greatest scope for behavioural changes from COVID-19 driving acceleration in demand, would that be APM, some of the wonderware and monitoring control, or would that be some other area? Thank you.
Wow, that's a short, good question, George. Everyone understands our business, the mix in our business between oil and gas, greenfield capex oil and gas, and then also the work we've been doing, investing in other sectors such as food and bev, life sciences, etc. We see for example, like in monitoring control, for example, food and bev, life sciences, and infrastructure all grew much, much more quickly in the year than oil and gas. Now, oil and gas also grew, but there was much stronger growth in those other industries. So we have a little bit of positive reinforcement that our work to expand products like Unified Operations Center into other sectors is actually quite a good strategy. So we're intent on doing that. I think you've heard that from us today. Look, just to rewind all the way back, greenfield capex is perhaps the area that is, as it relates to oil and gas, is perhaps the area that is the most that comes under pressure when oil majors are announcing expense cuts. The other side of that coin is those oil majors all believe that digitalization is how they get to maintain and protect their own profitability. So digitalization becomes more front of mind with those majors, notwithstanding the headwinds of the pressures around it. So look, we're comfortable with the mix of the business we have. We think 3 major geographies, 4 business lines, a series of industries. We have a level of multiple different revenue types. We have a level of diversification across our business that we think buys us well for a company of our size. Thanks, George.
Thank you. And the next one is from... Yes, we have one more, and that is from Peter McNally. Please ask your question.
Hi, yeah. I think you guys have touched on this a bit, but just to get it out, would you say there's been less of a benefit from the multi-year contracts in the second half of the year? I'm just looking at the contract assets versus the first half?
Hi, Peter. Yes, that's probably right. I mean, overall, the contract assets have gone up 42 million in the full year, and in the first half, it was up 27, wasn't it? So yeah. So,
it was about 25 versus 15 or something.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so slightly less benefit in the second half. That's right.
Okay, and just another point was you mentioned that across all three regions there were customers on maintenance contracts that shifted to the annual subscription. Without giving too much away, I guess, could we get a feel for how much more they're paying on average? And can you just remind us what they're getting for paying that higher amount? And I don't know if you can talk about, this compressed your maintenance growth to about 4%. What would it have been without that? Thanks.
James?
Craig? Yeah, sure. So when we get these opportunities, in the pipeline, we're saying to the sales guys we're expecting an uplift of 20 to 25% to convert a maintenance contract on subscription. So that's sort of the guidance we give, and typically we're achieving that. Not always, but we certainly are pretty disciplined around that because it's an important thing to drive.
And look, I'll just add here, Peter, on subscription, it's the difference between buying an album that you love versus subscribing to Apple Music or Spotify. You get a lot more choice and flexibility on the subscription model. So customers, it's called Flex. They can buy a subscription, a Flex subscription. They can pick and choose what products they have within that subscription sort of envelope, and they pay for it based on their consumption. Versus a perpetual model where you're paying up front for the entire life of the product. In this current climate, anything that's saving cost, anything that provides better flexibility, that delivers values more quickly, is far more interesting to customers than sort of 5-year business cases, for example.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Operator, I think we have to close it there. Is that right?
Yes, thank you. That was our last question, and I would now like to hand the call back over to Mr. Craig Hayman, the CEO, for closing remarks.
Well, look, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for your interest. Our strategy is unchanged, albeit we are the same company now working differently as the world has turned again. We think that, for example, in retail, there's been a dramatic shift to even more dramatic shift through online purchasing in the last 90 days, which shows the shift of digitalization. Even industries that you thought were penetrated with digital can go so much further with digital. In our industries, they're still underpenetrated with digital technology, digital transformation, and we're still seeing good demand from our customers, albeit under very difficult macroeconomic conditions. So thank you for your focus. We appreciate it, and we look forward to talking with you soon.